Your life journey doesn't stand still, and neither should your wealth. Welcome to Wealth on the Move, the podcast. Will Hoffman offers investment advice through Private Advisor Group, which is a federally registered investment advisor. The opinions voiced in this podcast are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult with the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a decision. Welcome back to Wealth on the Move, the podcast. I'm your host, Will Hoffman, founder and president of Hoffman Wealth Management. And we're going to get into some stuff today that is really unique. Now, as a financial advisor, as president of a wealth management firm, our goal is always to make sure that our clients understand about one of the largest risks to their retirement portfolio. And that's not the market. That is not taxes. That is not inflation, although all three of those are very important risks to be mindful of. It's longevity. And we are living longer than ever. And when we sit down with a client who is 65 and retiring, we don't imagine ourselves in front of a couple of 65-year-olds. We have to imagine ourselves in front of one 95-year-old. And what does their life look like through their retirement, and how is their wealth keeping pace with their life? And I've met a gentleman by the name of John Sabes, and he's going to be a guest today on the Wealth on the Move podcast. And he's written a book, Healthy, Wealthy, Longevity. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about his findings when it comes to longevity and money. This is going to be an interesting one because I usually have an outline. I purposely didn't do one this time because I'm going to be as inquisitive as you all are when it comes to some of John's philosophies and what he describes. So, John, welcome to Wealth on the Move, the podcast.
Well, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited, and hopefully I purposely didn't introduce you or your topic. I'm going to leave that up to you because, you know, our first conversation was so interesting and compelling. I've started to get into the book a bit, and you and I have a lot of commonalities, both endurance athletes. You seem to like the bike a lot more than I do. I tried to train for an Ironman. I hated sitting on that bicycle, but I can see your bicycles behind you, your weight bench behind you, and also your pinball machine. So I'm excited to get to know you and talk to you a little bit more. But why don't you give our listeners and viewers a quick introduction to John Sabes and your philosophies on healthy, wealthy, and longevity.
Sure. John Sabes, serial entrepreneur in the financial services, almost over 2 decades now in a variety of capacities. Self-taught on, I would say, the ideas of longevity, but I was introduced to it through my business. Yeah, I've written a book called Healthy, Wealthy, Longevity, and this book started about the topic of longevity and financial services, and just is exactly what you were describing, which is I felt as though the financial services industry doesn't do enough in terms of training, in terms of education, to bring forward this very important notion that I think you're unique amongst financial advisors, which says, you know, hey, we got to think about your 90-year-old self here.
Right.
And because this person that you know, hopefully you'll get to know your 80 or 85, 90, 95, 100-year-old self, and you know them quite well. And there are some things we should do today so that when you meet that person, they'll give you a big warm hug and they'll say, man, thanks for doing that back when you were 65, 70, because I'm over here at 90, 95. I'm vulnerable. I need others, and I need you, my younger self, to do some things so that I can be happy right now.
Yeah, I love that analogy and thinking about that, because a lot of folks, you know, when they're coming into our office, it's almost heartbreaking to see how they feel like it's ending when they're 65, and it's time to retire. It's time to slow down. And I don't know, maybe my philosophy or my outlook on the world is a bit different. I can't wait to have the governor off and be able to go and see and do and be as freely as possible without worrying about a business, and maybe I won't ever do that. Who knows? Folks, you know, they're not excited to make it to 95, and they don't think that it's a reality. And I can't tell you how many 95-year-olds I've sat in front of who were 75 or 70 when we met.
Yeah. It is, what do they say? I mean, the 65 is the new 45. I
Right.
mean, that is the reality. If you've taken care of this body just a little bit, and even if you haven't, by the way, and it's an important part of my book, and it's a great message to bring to folks. Even if you haven't, this human body, this human machine is so resilient.
Mm-hmm.
It so wants to be healthy. And
Right.
all you got to do is feed it a little bit of love, give it a little bit of care, a little bit of intention, and it will thank you over and over. And you really can set yourself up for healthy, wealthy longevity. The subtext of the book is the good things in life for as long as possible. And,
Yeah.
I'd been working in and around this longevity industry for 20 plus years. I've done all sorts of actuarial analysis, blah, 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 blah. I've commercialized molecular biomarkers of health and aging for the life insurance industry called epigenetic biomarkers. I'm a self-taught, if you will, a student of the science of the body because I had to for one of my ventures. I wanted to write something. And in the midst of starting my new business called Longevity Financial Partners, my mother got sick. She was 83 years old. She had cancer and she said, yeah, I'm good. I'm not going to do chemo. I'm not going to, like my life's been a dream. And longevity became very personal to me in a way that it hadn't. For me, it had always been an actuarial calculation. What's the chances? What are the probabilities? It had been a molecular biomarker. My epigenetic biological age is 48. I'm 58 chronologically. Great. We can do all these things. And suddenly it was this really personal thing. And I think where you're at the outset, what you're saying to folks is to recognize, and this is again an important message, your longevity, your life, and your health span, being in good health is your most valuable asset.
Right.
It is invaluable. It is so important. And like all things, we take our relationships with our closest loved ones for granted, and we take ourselves for granted. We don't do the self-care we need to do to preserve and protect this thing called our own longevity. Because if we do care for this body, it will take care of us. And it can 65 can be the new 45, and you can have 30, 40 more years of vibrant life, real life, real meaningful life. And whether that's you continue in your career, my father's 85, he works still every single day, or it's, you want to do golf and fish, whatever that is, those are all personal journey decisions. Sure. But you just bottom line want to have this body in a way that sustains you. We want to stave off, if you will, chronic disease. The thing about mortality is it's not one thing the adage is not one thing that kills you, it's everything.
Sure.
And so really the goal of health span is this idea of staving off the onset of chronic disease for as long as possible. And as we do that, this body can and does remain vibrant. The other piece of the puzzle, which I write about, is, and this is your job, which is, how does money play into this?
Right.
I like to say the worst possible outcome in growing old is to be alone and poor. That's a bad outcome. And so how do we take the steps to mitigate the risk of that happening? And we need to do that while we're younger.
Right. That's I don't know that in 23 years of this career, I've sat in front of somebody and they didn't say, I wish I would have started earlier, whether that's saving, investing, planning, regardless, they all say the same thing. It's the common phrase that we hear. I wish my kids would listen to me now when I'm telling them to start thinking about this earlier. I wish I would have thought about this earlier, because you're right. This can all carry us for as long as we want, or as long as we can intend for it to, if we're mindful about it. And you said something else that just took me back to my initial, I started on the, I don't know if insurance side is the right way, but I started as a captive advisor for an insurance company, still doing financial planning, but they were, and rightfully so, a proponent of insurance as being the base of every good financial plan, and disability insurance. And, our bodies and our ability to earn is our largest asset, regardless of the size of our house, regardless of the size of our portfolios. Our ability to earn and how we earn with our bodies and our minds is our most important asset, and we need to protect it. Now, obviously, they wanted me to go sell disability insurance, but there are other ways to do that, whether it's diet, exercise, nutrition, all of those things are just as important as the insurance.
Yeah, I mean, right. The first rule of investing is invest in yourself.
Yes.
Right. We are our most important asset. And so we can and should, we need to invest in ourselves. We need to invest in our education. We need to invest in our intellectual vibrancy, and we need to
Yeah.
invest in self-care of eating well and moving this body so that we can live the best life possible for as long as possible. You know, there's no guarantees. I like to write about is there's no guarantees, but we want to increase the odds. And so you increase the odds of that happening by leaning into health. I say you can go all in on health. There's no,
Yeah.
there's no, there's, you can just go all in. I mean, really. And on money, you know, you can't go all in. You need to do diversification. You need to be
Sure.
more careful there, but you can still go all in on yourself. Okay. And so
Hmm.
so that was sort of the framework I wrote for the book. And really that book is probably, I sent one for your son, and I'm hoping he'll
Yeah.
get that and read that. And it's a scaffolding. I'm like, you can do this for the rest of your life, and you're going to increase the odds that the outcome you want is at the end. You can look back, no matter how long it goes, you go, my life's been a dream.
Yeah.
Right. That's what we all want, you know, because it's all recency bias. You know, it could have been amazing for the first 40, 60 years, but if the last 10 years are alone and impoverished, you're going to be like, God,
Right. That's what you
if the
remember.
last, it could have been the opposite. You know, you could have struggled at this and that. The last 10 years were like amazing. You'd be like, this is fucking amazing.
Yeah.
It's all recency bias. So how do we set, and I think financial planners and the folks who work with you are so lucky to have an advisor who can even conceive this and advise people on how to get the most out of life, generally speaking. And it's not just about alpha. It's not just about return.
Right.
You know, it's about mitigating risk of loss. It's about mitigating the risk of outliving our assets. It's about investing in the things that matter in life that will allow us to be surrounded by our loved ones at the end of our life and still have some money in the bank and a legacy, you know, for some grandkids maybe to go to school. And you're going to look around and go, this is my life's been a dream. That's it.
Yeah. I want to ask you about the science of longevity. And you had touched on and I know I'm going to mispronounce this, the epigenetic
You got it.
testing. Can you explain to us what that is and how we can use it to kind of understand that age versus what our real age is?
Yeah. So let's we'll back up just a little bit. In my career, I was challenged with one of my businesses, which was predicting how long people live, and I felt the industry was using 1960s 70s technology, and I was yelling at my team, we got to be better at this. There's got to be I mean, everything's changing, right?
Right.
And so of course no one did anything. I'd yell at them and no one does anything as usual. They were doing things, but not at the level I wanted. So I started reading every peer-reviewed scientific. I'd never read a peer-reviewed scientific article in my life. There's this thing called the internet. You can actually get on. Right. You can actually access. I started reading peer-reviewed scientific articles on genetics. I'm like, oh, well, DNA, genetics, and I self-taught myself what retaught myself what DNA. I'm a product of the 80s, I guess. I graduated high school in 1985.
Okay.
Right. And so we learned a little bit about what DNA was back then. But I was also in the sex ed class, and I was like, yeah, this is the part of the DNA that I'm really interested in. Like, how do we make babies?
Right.
So I relearned, if you will, like, what is DNA and where does it come? What is its physical structure? I ended up learning about that, self-taught. I explain it specifically in my book. It's very important. And what I found through that research was there really isn't a big link between your DNA and your overall longevity. Of course, if your parents live longer, you have an odds. You have a head start. But
Right.
if you sit on the couch and smoke cigarettes and eat potato chips and don't move, trust me, you're not going to live as long as your parent.
It doesn't matter what they did, right?
It doesn't matter. So now we're into lifestyle. And at a certain point, my brother, who was working with me at the time, said, well, how about this? And he handed me the cover story of Nature magazine. And it had this guy, Dr. Steve Horvath from UCLA, and they were announcing the discovery of the epigenetic clock. This thing called the epigenetic clock. And so by this time, I was sort of self-taught. And I read the article, and it said, Dr. Steve Horvath has discovered these epigenetic biomarkers that are highly predictive of longevity and mortality. And I could read that. I go, well, this isn't genetics. This is definitely something different. I was smart enough to be dangerous. anyways, I flew out to UCLA. I sat down with Dr. Steve Horvath. I said, hey, so let me understand this, Dr. Horvath. We're two 50-year-olds. Your epigenetic clock says your biological age is 60. My epigenetic clock or biological age says I'm 40. Are you telling me that you, the 60-year-old biologically, have a much higher risk of all-cause mortality than me, the 40-year-old? Goes, oh yeah, 100%, absolutely. And this is a Harvard-trained geneticist, Austrian biostatistician,
Okay.
right? So he's like deadpan cold. I'm like, oh shit, wow. I said, you ever heard of this thing called the life insurance industry? He's like, no, what's that? I'm like, oh, it's just this little industry that entire business is
everything's based on
how long people live.
Right.
Anyways, and so that led me down a journey of commercializing what are called epigenetic biomarkers. And so the next question was, I think I said something like, that's how old you are is the first question on your life insurance application, or male, female, and I said, well, the next one is, do you smoke or not? And he said, well, I could tell you not only if they smoke or not, but how much they smoke. Well, that's great, because that's the third question on the life insurance. So that sent me down this whole journey of what epigenetic biomarkers that I was commercializing for a new life insurance underwriting protocol.
Okay.
What I learned. So the epigenetic biomarkers, the epigenome is the epidermis, right? The skin of the genome. So you have your genome, your DNA, you get half from mom, half from dad. That's your blueprint.
Right.
The epigenome is the skin, the epidermis of the genome. And what happens, and I describe this as well as I can in the book, because when I learned this, it changed so much for me. What happens is that as we live, if we smoke tobacco, for example, we cause chemical markers called methylation, methyl groups, that attach along this epigenome. And the epigenome and the methylation causes the gene to express. And what literally happens on this DNA, we've heard this DNA strand, and to understand even what it looks like and how it mechanically works is so fascinating. It's beyond science fiction. But literally what happens is these methyl groups attach to this DNA, which is all tightly spooled up, and it causes it to unwind and actually show part of the DNA that causes DNA replication. So when we methylate the DNA, it's causing gene expression. So when we say epigenetics, we're talking about the science of gene expression.
Okay.
The analogy I use is there's two analogies to think about. One is sort of sheet music. Your DNA is the sheet music.
Right. Okay.
Your epigenome is the musician.
Okay.
So how you play that sheet music, right, is driving what that music sounds like. So that's you, the musician. You're the music. You are the musician. The other one is a general contractor analogy, which is the blueprint, right, for your house is your DNA. The general contractor, right, is your epigenome. That's your epigenetics. So you could have a shitty blueprint, which was all wrong, but through gene expression, you might have genetic mutations, but through expression, those mutations may not express. And so, so when we talk about gene expression, it's all about, epigenetics. It's about gene expression. Okay. And the big aha moment is to understand, which for me tied this all together, is that while genetics are so important, they are only about 20 to 30% of who you are. Okay. And the rest of who you are today is driven by something else. Okay. Much of it is how these genes are expressed. And the big thing to learn from this is lifestyle, right? The thing we have control over, lifestyle, drives so much of that gene expression. Okay. So lifestyle, if we smoke, that's why Dr. Steve Horvath said, oh, if they smoke tobacco, I can tell you if they smoke because I can see those methylation markers along their epigenome. And so the same way, if I don't smoke, if I exercise, if I do all of these things, what I'm causing is better gene expression, which drives better health.
Okay. If we do other things than smoke.
Yep.
Too much, drinking.
Yep.
Too much sunlight.
Yep.
Not enough sunlight. Things like that all get expressed on that epigenome.
Yeah, that's correct. So all lifestyle, all the inputs. By the way,
Okay.
trauma,
Sure.
stress, every input, right? That
Sitting
comes
too
in.
much, sedentary lifestyle.
All the inputs are driving gene expression. The DNA
Okay.
doesn't necessarily know that you know, you're smoking. It just knows that you're causing chemical markers, and then it drives. So this is sort of this idea of lifestyle really does drive very upstream at a molecular level your health. And so you
Okay.
are influencing your health. They've done studies where these twin studies, and it carries over. There's some hereditary with this where there's a
That
very popular study, and I think it's the Danish study. I'm gonna get this wrong. It was in Scandinavia. It was during World War II. This community was cut off from food for many months during World War II because
okay.
of the war. And all the babies then that were conceived and born during this basically naturally gained a lot more weight because the epigenome remembered you need to eat more. What you need, I need to consume more. So there's my point being is there are all the inputs, the external environmental inputs, your body is registering them at a molecular level and is driving who you are at a physical level in ways that are really hard to conceive. And I do my best in the book to explain that so that people can understand how much more agency they have uh, in why these things tie. It's like, well, you shouldn't smoke. Well, why? I
Right.
mean, like, like why? I mean, like, I get it. I mean, there's some tar. I know I shouldn't drink too much, but why? You like it was like learning. Like your mother would say, well, you have a cold, have chicken soup. Well, why does that it was like learning. Here's your chicken soup.
Okay. So, and you started to talk about this. There was a Netflix documentary about twins. You Are What You Eat,
Yeah.
where they diet of identical twins was vastly different, and I don't remember how long the control period was, but then they did this methylation test afterwards and showed the ill effects of having a good healthy diet versus not.
So identical twins are the case study for epigenetic and gene expression, right?
Okay.
So identical twins have identical DNA. Okay. So, and yet if one of them does this and the other one does that, and you look at them, and we would, in our materials, we would have these smoker, non-smoker identical twins, and you just look at the pictures of the two.
Yeah.
That manifestation, right, isn't their DNA. That's just simply lifestyle, and the lifestyle is driving, right, the physical manifestation of good health or poor health.
Okay. Out of curiosity, how did the life insurance industry respond to the idea of ditching the actuarial spreadsheets and using something like that?
Well, we still use the actuarial spreadsheets. What I was interested in ditching was the blood and urine specimen collection
Okay.
side of the business, right? Because you talk to producers and folks who sell life insurance and this underwriting journey. First of all, the relationship between you and your life insurance company comes with a paramed showing up at your house wanting 4 vials of blood and asking you to pee in a cup.
Right.
I mean, like that is just not a great way to begin a
welcome. Right.
Yeah, welcome. And maybe we want this just to even decide. First of all, then we're going to gather up all your medical records. It's going to take 8 weeks to decide how much we should charge you.
Right.
Even if we're going to maybe even offer you. So like my whole philosophy was, well, we could get rid of that. If people would spit in a tube, we could look at all these things and get to the same result. Basically, you basically put people on tables of, standard health, great health or poor health. And so we could get to these same places, but we could do it in a very less invasive, much more efficient way. But the insurance companies were like, well, why do we have to fix anything? It works.
Right. It works for them.
The producers, by the way, the guys who sell and gals who sell life insurance were like, it's too good to be true. Like,
Yeah.
If I could get someone a life insurance policy without having to do this, it's just too good to be true. And I just first of all, it is true. Whether I can make it commercially happen or not has a lot to do with things that I can't control. But I'm going to do my best, because I knew if I could bring this to market, all things being equal, the insurance policies that have this underwriting attached to it versus the blood and urine specimen cup, the insurance agent was going to go, I think we should buy this product.
Right.
Spit here, we're done. Spit here,
Yeah,
we're done.
that would change a lot
Yeah.
quickly.
Yeah.
So now, I think about this in how we work with folks.
Yeah.
And we are trying to plan for so many scenarios.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of big things that impact what we're planning for that we have no idea. What's the market going to do? I mean, if any of us knew that, we wouldn't need financial plans, right? What's inflation going to look like? Again, be a giant bit of information. And the biggest one is, how long am I going to live?
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, because
let's pause there. Let's pause right there. I want to just hit on that for a second because it's so interesting. In America, over the last 30 to 50 years, we had a massive shift of policy. And the policy shifted from the corporation, the pension fund, the government, we at an institutional level are going to provide for you into old age. We are going to take care of your economic security into old age.
Right.
And the interesting thing about that is it's actually kind of an easy thing to do at an institutional level because, well, I can't tell you who's going to die next year in a pool of 1,000. I can tell you someone's going to.
Sure.
And so you can actually do the math and it actually works. I almost liken it to turning up the heat on the stove of a boiling pot of water. If you just 1 degree each day until suddenly it's boiling, where we shifted the responsibility of financial security to the individual.
Right.
And we did it slowly. And the corporation said, we don't want to do this anymore. It's a lot. And we spend the money and we have these overfunded, underfunded pensions. It's all confusing. We're just unfrozen caveman corporations trying to manage pension funds. How about you guys do it? You can manage your own. You put it in yourself. We're going to create these things called self-directed retirement funds. You just put your own money in. Well, that's all sounded great, except for this little thing called the variability of life expectancy. And exactly what you say. For the individual, is it 70 or 100? And here's the crazy thing. Living to 100 is an outlier, okay? Meaning, sure, if you don't smoke.
It's an outlier for now.
Well, it's an outlier as far as we know. Look, no one really knows. Really, no one knows. And whether that changes or whatever, it's an outlier, meaning you can exercise and eat great foods and all of this, blah, blah, blah. And you might get cancer tomorrow and die.
Right.
Okay. It's just real. And you may smoke and have your shot of whiskey and eat your eggs and bacon every morning. And you may be 100 years old. The longest living documented person in the world was a known smoker until she was like 110. So my point is,
decided to quit.
It's a total outlier. Okay. And so like planning for that is really, really difficult. And that is exactly what you say. So I want to just pause on. And
because, and even asking for family history, it's helpful. But when you think of just science and forget the knowing more about our DNA and our molecular structure, the medicine and the science is changing that. So it's almost irrelevant how long our parents lived to try to calculate that into a financial plan.
Yeah, look, life expectancies are increasing. They've been increasing for many decades. We're living in some of the highest life expectancies right now. The science around longevity is sort of facing this critical question. It's been very interesting. I've been working in this space for almost a decade, and they're really trying to answer that. Can we extend lifespan itself? What we really do know is the odds of increasing health span, getting to 85, 90, 95 in vibrant good health is very, very feasible so long as you do some of the right things and live the right ways. And in that regard, I work specifically with the folks at Blue Zones. And Blue Zones is an area of science. There's a Netflix documentary on Blue Zones. Highly encourage anyone to watch that. Dan Buettner's got these great books. But Blue Zones was the science of these 5 geographic locations: Okinawa, Japan; Sardinia, Italy; Nicoya, Costa Rica; Icaria, Greece, where the individuals had this amazingly high level of centenarian lifespans.
Okay.
And what Dan did was he studied these areas, and through the National Institute of Aging and National Geographic, he published on this and really came up with 9 lifestyle things that really they found were commonalities in these otherwise very geographically dispersed things. Coming back to this, what we find is not even taking away the advances in medical science, which you're pointing to, which is connecting with others, living with purpose, having this well-rounded, beautiful life is so important to our overall longevity. Drop into that, precision medicine, what's happening with, AI and everything else.
Sure.
I mean, it's a really, we all have a very unique opportunity to live longer, better lives.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Wealth on the Move, the podcast, brought to you by Hoffman Wealth Management. Here at Hoffman Wealth Management, we focus on working with busy families and active retirees, helping them navigate the complicated scenarios of their wealth while building the life that they desire. And we believe that every financial journey deserves direction. That is exactly what our proprietary process, the HWM navigation formula, provides. Just like a GPS, our navigation formula begins with 2 key questions. Where are you now? What does your financial picture currently look like? And where do you want to go? What goals and dreams do you have? From there, we help you navigate every financial turn en route to your desired destination with clarity and confidence. It's more than a plan, it's a personalized path forward. If you want to learn more on how the navigation formula can work for you, reach out through the contact options in the show notes below. We would love to help you chart your next move. Now, back to this episode of Wealth on the Move, the podcast. So I want to, how do we test our own clocks to find out, to say in our financial plan, hey, listen, right now, because I'm going to make the understanding that if that clock is not, I'm 47. If my clock showed I was 67, there are still things I can do to start reducing that clock to get healthier and younger from a epigenetic clock standpoint. But how do we get that initial test?
Yeah, so the epigenetic clock, there are several companies that offer epigenetic biological clock testing. A couple of I'll call reputable companies. So you can do that. You really can get your biological age tested via
Can I ask a silly question too?
Yeah,
And maybe
sure.
this is something our listeners are sitting there wondering.
Yeah.
I know I'm sitting here wondering, why don't our doctors do this? I mean, are we going to jump off a philosophical cliff here, or why doesn't my PCP do this every year?
Yeah, I mean, those are all fair questions. Why don't doctors, one of the things I'm going to mention blue zones again. Why don't doctors talk to us about plant-based dieting, connecting with others, living with purpose, how these things are so important.
They had 2 weeks of nutrition class and 20 years of med school. So that's why they don't talk to us about that.
Yeah. So this is this idea of, and it's hard for people to get their head around some of these concepts where, keeping yourself out of the medical system is really your goal.
You're right.
The medical system is not your friend. So that's kind of why,
not healthcare, right?
Yeah, I mean, so the critique of epigenetic clocks has been there is variability. So there can be variability in the test itself. So it's sort of, it can be sometimes. I don't subscribe to the criticism so much, but I'm just going to put it out there. Someone says, well, yeah, but. And by the way, Peter Attia, I'm a big fan of this fellow by the name of Peter. So he wrote a book called Outlive.
Yeah.
By the way, on his most recent podcast, if you want to learn all about this, on his most recent podcast, there's a longevity. It's the longevity podcast. Peter Attia. He's got the former head of the Buck Institute, which was the foremost longevity science. It is one of the best podcasts that I've heard recently on the state of longevity science, what I should do and what I shouldn't do. And they'll talk about epigenetics, and you'll be like, oh yeah, that's what I heard on this on Will's podcast. And so they're going to talk about
I've got a 12 long run tomorrow, so now I know what I'm going to listen to.
Oh, it was great. I have everyone who's interested in longevity, I'm like, listen to this. It's the best one I have heard.
Well, because he's more than just don't smoke. He's, you have to be preparing yourself to carry your groceries from your car to your kitchen when you're 80. And grip strength is something that's important to him beyond just don't smoke, don't drink, eat well.
Oh yeah. Peter is probably the foremost, I'll call, practitioner of longevity science. And And a big thing, and that's why you mentioned you see some weights behind me. I mean, I shifted my daily training from, I used to do lots of long distance stuff. I focus on strength now. I'm 58 chronologically. My biological age is 48. I've been a health, person
Sure.
for a lot of years. I liken it, and in a book I describe it to like a health savings account. Like I have like 10 years, extra years sort of banked,
Yeah.
because it's all going to converge, right? I'm going to draw down. I'm going to start drawing down on those extra 10 years in my 80s and my 90s, right? So what I'm
That's a
building,
great analogy.
right, is savings, right? I think in my book I call it my health accumulation account, where I'm going to start drawing down on that because I'm going to start getting weaker. But for me, the big transition was, and I just did this intuitively. I was like, I'm going to move from long distance stuff to strength because I'm losing muscle mass. So
Yeah.
sarcopenia, frailty is like the number one risk. So there are some things that just start happening to us. We get slower, we get frail, we get skinny. And so maintaining muscle mass actually is one of the highest correlations to health span and lifespan, which is maintaining muscle mass. It's a very interesting
Yeah.
statistic. I guess I'm just getting self-validated by some things that I just sort of like intuitively, my body's like, I got to stop running this much. I'm going to wear all this stuff,
Joints
these
and
joints.
cartilage.
Yeah, I'm going to wear all this stuff out, and I want to build some muscle mass. I want to carry this
So
body strong.
I always say I'm running to get away from Father Time, but maybe I need to recalibrate that thought process a bit.
I don't know. I mean, I always, I say, I'm running for life. I'm training.
Yeah.
Everyone would say, like, what are you training for? I say, I'm training for life. I'm training to have and I used running and long distance stuff for resiliency as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
You learn when it gets hard on a long distance run that you can move through that, and
Mhm.
you can and it feels good, and it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a great metaphor and a place to practice sort of resiliency and testing yourself at any distance, by the way. I don't care if it's a 5K, a 10K, but just to get I'm a big positive psychology guy. I'm a
Yeah.
big self-help guy. So
Well,
how do we set ourselves up? Yeah.
My oldest son did his first 5K last year, and the confidence after was noticeable
Yeah.
because he had learned he could do something hard and push through it, and the sense of accomplishment and the confidence has been a avalanche gathering for him, and it's
I
been
love
really
that.
impressive to watch. Some closing thoughts.
Yeah.
What's your vision for the next, for the future when it comes to health and wealth innovation? Do we start to see these epigenetic tests be more prevalent, more available, easier to get, so that your doctor and your financial advisor can communicate the way your accountant and your financial advisor should communicate?
I don't think it goes that direction. I'm more in
Okay.
I'm more in the line of the financial advisors. Again, you're already ahead of the game, but financial advisors get more in tune with what are the factors that lead to healthy, wealthy longevity. And
Okay.
those are a little bit more holistic than
Sure.
simply how's your portfolio doing and how long is it going to. So the advisors kind of get a little bit more broadly, kind of a window by here's your money and what's your money supposed to do. And if we look at blue zones, if we look at these, if we can create some training and some education to financial advisors, say, no, look, we're going to allocate some money to this and to this and to this. Why? Because this is about self-help. This is about self-care. These things will add measurable value to your life and your overall happiness. And as your financial advisor, my number one goal is to see you live a happy, long life so you can say, my life's been a dream, and
Yes.
Will and his team helped me get there. And that has a lot to do with some guys, I'm sure will be like, well, did I have $100 in my account or 10? If I had
Right.
100, Will, you did your job. I had 10, no. And I would just simply say, that's okay for them, but at least but for others, it'd be like, no, 10's good because look what I also got to do. And
Yeah.
I'm surrounded with people I love. And I got, 10, 90, I'm 95 years of age. So that's the one thing. The other thing I would suggest will happen is, and that's where I want to be a part of, is creating and bringing some really innovative new products to market that help you, the financial planner, deal with that risk, that unpredictability, which is the number one thing, which is I don't know, is it going to be 70 or 100? That's
Yeah.
30. Those are 30 years, and so like, planning for that
It's your
financially,
career,
I think
right? I mean, that's
yeah, there are some really unique ways to deal with that, and I'm very proud that later this year, and happy to get back on the show to talk about what those products look like. But I think there's some real incredible opportunity to bring better product and longevity financial planning to the forefront of in the financial planning industry, along with what are the key inputs to live a happier, more fulfilled, vital life.
yes. Well, you've given. I don't know that I've ever taken this many notes during a podcast interview. I have a lot of things that I need to now go back and look up. I know I struggled a bit with the pronunciation of epigenetic clock, so I'm glad I was
You
able to
nailed it.
start
Yeah, you
get
nailed
through that.
that.
We do have a tradition here on Wealth on the Move, the podcast. Totally have stolen this from Diary of a CEO. And on Diary of a CEO, he asks his podcast guests a question from a previous podcast guest. And it's really interesting to watch how folks that may be completely unrelated in discipline or in education can really start to come together. So it's something that, again, totally copped it from Diary of a CEO, but we've started to institute it here on Wealth on the Move. So your question comes from Christy Dosh. Christy Dosh is an NIL attorney working with college athletes on the name, image, and likeness opportunity that's in front of them now that wasn't before. Really compelling guest, had a lot to teach us about how student athletes and their parents can navigate this. And her question was, what is a quote or a saying that you have lived by your entire life?
My entire life. I don't know how. Well, boy. Um, I'll give a couple. I have a couple of them.
Okay, shoot.
Okay, that come. Yeah. Um, do what you say, and you'll get what you want. So
Okay.
that comes from my father. There's a lot of people who say a lot of things, but they don't do what they say. So do what you say, you'll get what you want. Another one would be, there's no explaining man or woman's indifference to themselves. And so when we think about our own health, our own self-care, we can be so indifferent to ourselves. We do so many things that are somewhat indifferent to ourselves. So I would suggest bring more intention and attention to those areas of your life that mean a lot to you, and do better at them. Don't be indifferent to your wife, to
Yeah.
your kids, bring more. You can do better there. Don't be indifferent to it. And the last one that comes immediate to mind is, how do you swallow the whale? One
One
bite
bite
at
at
a
a time.
time.
That's
Yeah.
it. I gave, so my kids are young and in sports, and we were in a championship baseball game with now he's 9, he would have been 7 at the time. And we started losing terribly right away. And the kids were down and you could see it. And I kind of said, yeah, we can't let them just stay down, or they're going to think that's how you respond every time things get tough. So I gathered the team around me and I said, do you guys know how you eat an elephant? And they kind of looked at each other and they're like, no, coach. I said, you eat an elephant one bite at a time. And that's exactly how we're going to come back and win this baseball game. We're going to do it one hit at a time, one catch at a time, one throw. And the other dad looked at me and goes, you have me ready to run through a brick wall after that. It's like, well, yeah. And we almost won. We only lost by 1 run. We came back though. We were down a lot with very little to play and came back and almost won. So I love that quote, one bite at a time. All right. So now, what's your question for our next guest? And I've been kind of scrolling through your LinkedIn posts, so I'm hoping you ask the one that I'm circled on right now.
Oh no! What is that? Well, why don't you propose it?
So I like the one that says, "What advice would you give your older, or what advice would your older self give you right now?"
That was the one I was going to say.
Because
I love that.
We always want to go back and talk to our younger selves, but what would your older? I saw that question, I loved it, and I was hoping that was going to be the one that you asked.
Yeah, you want your older self, when you meet that person who you
Mhm.
already know so well, give you a big warm hug and go, God, that was a good decision
Yeah.
back when you were 65. Thank you.
And for me, it wouldn't be monetarily, and maybe I'm listening to my grandmother, and I've always been very busy. I was in college, I was our student body president for 2 years. In high school, I was in clubs and sports. And my grandmother used to tell me all the time, make sure you are taking time for yourself. And I think that's what my older self would come back and tell me now. That's what I would tell my younger self now, is make sure you are taking more time for yourself. And that doesn't mean be selfish. It just means to focus on what's important to you and the people around you. And I think that's what my advice from my older self, I think, would be.
Amen.
Well, John, thank you so much for joining us today. If our folks want to follow and connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, it's John, Jon, Sabis, S-A-B as in boy, E-S. I'm on all your favorite social media platforms. The book, Healthy, Wealthy Longevity, is available on Amazon. I've got these prompt journals that I'm a big fan of. I developed them myself. You can get those on my website, johnsabis.com, and engage with me. And appreciate you. Appreciate being on the podcast. Love what you're bringing to your clients. I can tell they're in good stead.
Well, thank you.
Work with you and your
Yeah, the
firm.
podcast is fun. It allows me to engage with, folks that we typically just hear invest, and there's so much more that goes into this for folks, and so much more that goes into our money, and that's the name of the podcast. That's why it's called Wealth on the Move. So thank you very much. If you want to catch us, hoffmanwealth.com. I'm very active on LinkedIn, Instagram, so make sure you check us out. And until next time, please remember to keep your wealth moving.
John Sabis and Longevity Financial. Partners are not affiliated with Hoffman Wealth Management and Private Advisor Group. This presentation is not intended as specific financial advice for any individual.